Good afternoon. My name is Susie Stern, and as a board member and programming committee chair for the Jewish Democratic Council of America, JDCA, I want to welcome you today and to today's community conversation focused on bringing the hostages home. This is our 12th program in a series of events since Hamas brutally attacked Israel on October 7th. Whether this is your first time joining us or your 12th, thank you for taking the time to join JDCA. Today's event will focus on the hostages, their families, and what we can do to help free the more than 130 individuals, men, women, and children who have been held captive in Gaza for the past 138 days. Today's program will be divided into three parts. First, we will hear from Jon Polin, whose 23-year-old son Hersh was taken captive by Hamas on October 7th. Then we will hear from Maya Roman, the cousin of Yarden Roman, who was released on November 29th, thankfully. Maya's other cousin, Carmel Gott, remains in captivity. Finally, we will hear from Shany Granot Lubaton, who's the coordinator of the Hostage and Missing Families Forum in New York. And she will talk about the forum and how we can take action, a most important issue for all of us. But first, I want to share some reflections of my recent trip to Israel. I have traveled to Israel more than 50 times. I actually have lost count, but this time was very different. What I saw was a country still in mourning, still in shock, reeling from the unbearable pain of the worst massacre of the Jewish people since the Holocaust. But I also saw immense goodness and kindness and grace of the Israeli people, united in helping those impacted in whatever ways they could. And I was greeted with profound gratitude for simply showing up, and to all Americans for our support, especially President Joe Biden for understanding and empathizing with Israel and for supporting Israel's security and the right to self-defense. As you know, reading about something and seeing something firsthand are two very, very different things. And nothing could have prepared me for my visit to Kibbutz Kfar Aza, where they have a youth village. It's a section of homes, individual homes for people between 18 and 30. It is the most idyllic setting with grapefruit trees and flowers, but it would be forever changed because without warning, an unimaginable slaughter happened house to house to house in a pogrom that stretched as far as the eye could see. And this was just one street of one kibbutz. October 7th has changed Israel forever, but how the people of Israel and Jews around the world have responded by helping those impacted by tragedy is the story of the Jewish people in its finest hour. Israelis and people from all over the country, all over the world have come together to rebuild and heal, consistent with the strength of the Jewish people and the people of Israel. Similarly, we have stood with all of Israel, especially the families who have joined us today in their ongoing efforts to bring home each and every hostage in Gaza. With that, I want to turn the program over to JDC CEO Haley Sofer to begin our conversation. Thank you so much for being here today for this most important conversation. Thanks.
Thank you, Susie. We all remember the moment on October 7th when we learned about Hamas's brutal attack on Israel and the long days and weeks since as we came to terms with the magnitude of the human toll in terms of the lives lost, the men, women, and children taken, and the lives forever changed by that horrific day of terror. Never could we have imagined that 137 days later, there would still be 130 hostages held by Hamas in Gaza with no word of their health or well-being. Hersh Goldberg-Polin and Jon Polin have been perhaps the most visible and outspoken hostage family, advocating not just for the release of their injured son, Hersh Goldberg-Polin, who was taken from the Nova Festival, but for the release of all the hostages. I had the honor of meeting Rachel and Jon in DC in November, following Rachel's incredibly powerful speech at the March for Israel. With great courage and resolve, they have continued to speak out each and every day, as noted by the tape that they wear. And you can see Jon saying 138. This is the 138th day to bring Hersh and the hostages home. Jon, we are sorry Rachel was unable to join us today, but we are so honored that you could be with us and to share your thoughts from Israel. So the first question is that we talk a lot about the hostages as a group. But of course, each and every person represents an entire world to their family. And it's important that we learn their stories as individuals so we can continue to advocate for each of their release. Could you please start by telling us about Hersh?
Sure. So first of all, thank you, Haley and Susie and the whole group for having me. Rachel has become quite a celebrity in these 138 days against any of our wishes, including her cover story in the Wall Street Journal today. And she is very sorry that she can't be with this group, but things oftentimes come up last minute and she had to run. But I will try my best to fill both of our shoes. Hersh turned 23 on October 3rd. He was celebrating his 23rd birthday with one of his best friends at the music festival. He is a really curious, interesting guy, a dry, sarcastic sense of humor. Rachel always likes to point out that it never crosses over to being mean. And something that we say a lot about Hersh and his temperament is we've never heard him raise his voice in his life. And he's never caused me to want to raise my voice. 23 years old, and I literally have never been angry at him. It's not that he's a perfect angel, but it's that even in his mischief, he knows not to cross lines. And he's just a super, super respectful person of his friends, his teachers, his parents, and really likable guy. Very curious, loves to travel, loves to read, and unfortunately has not been able to make it on the big roam the world trip that he planned for December 27th, but we're hoping it's going to happen to him, for him, soon.
Thank you. Some of us have heard the horrific story of Hersh's kidnapping, but we want to make sure that everyone on this call knows. What would you like to share with us about what happened to Hersh on October 7th?
Sure. So I won't share the whole tale of how we found out what happened, but I'll just go through the facts, which is Hersh was with us. I'll back up a night. Hersh was with us on October 6th. It was a Friday. Friday night was Shabbat and the Jewish holiday of Simchat Torah. We all went as a family together to synagogue and celebrated. And then we went to a close friend's house for dinner with another family. There were 3 families total. And both Rachel and I remarked afterwards at how nice it was, just comfortable at dinner with the old people on one side, the young adults on the other side, everybody friends, everybody having a good time together. And at 11 o'clock at night, he kissed us, both Rachel and me, goodbye and said, see you tomorrow. And he left with his backpack to go camping with his good friend Aner Shapira. What we now know happened is they ended up going down to the music festival. Hersh is a huge music lover and a big fan of music festivals. He spent this past summer traveling around Europe going to music festivals. And what we now know happened is early in the morning when the attack occurred, Hersh, Aner, and 2 other friends got in a car to head north, but were stopped by a row of cars that had already been shot at and were blocking the road with, unfortunately, young people killed in those cars. So they turned around, went back south, and as the rockets were flying overhead in the south, they all jumped out and ended up in an above-ground bomb shelter. Early in the morning, the 29 young people packed into a 5-foot by 8-foot bomb shelter came under attack. The Hamas terrorists started to throw hand grenades into the shelter. Hersh's close friend Aner was able to intercept 7 of them, catch them, and throw them back out before they detonated inside. Ultimately, the 8th one did detonate inside, and unfortunately, Aner's body was found subsequently with a hand grenade in his hand. And then 3 more hand grenades did detonate inside, causing a lot of carnage. What we now know is of the 29 people who had been in the bomb shelter, 18 were killed that morning. 7 were evacuated 8 hours later after playing dead under a pile of bodies. and 4 were taken captive, including Hersh. And what we learned from eyewitnesses is that when he was taken out at gunpoint just before 9 a.m. on October 7th, they all noticed that his arm had been blown off at some point during the attack. We've subsequently received a video of the incident. We see him being loaded onto a Hamas pickup truck heading towards Gaza, and that is the last image we have of Hersh at all. His phone signal was last tracked at 10:25 a.m. on the 7th inside of Gaza. And since then, we know pretty much nothing about where he is, what his status is he being held with others or alone? Is he even alive? That is what happened on the 7th and what we know since then.
Well, as I noted at the outset, we have all been so grateful for the resolute leadership that you and Rachel have demonstrated, speaking out each day on behalf of the hostages, for the release of the hostages. And in your advocacy, you've met with a range of global leaders, including President Biden and the Pope. You've gone around the world. Which leaders and what action has given you hope? And what advocacy has been most effective in getting closer to the hostages being released?
It's a great question, and we have indeed been around the world, literally multiple trips back and forth between Israel and the United States, multiple trips to Europe, meeting with all of the people that you've talked about. I got to tell you, the people from whom we've gotten the most strength in the last 138 days are not world leaders at all. In fact, while there are world leaders working hard, 138 days into this, there are still 134 hostages being held. So I feel like all of us have failed in the one mission that we're working on right now. But where we have gotten a lot of inspiration and a lot of strength is what I'll call the average person like us. Jews, non-Jews, Israelis, Americans, people around the world. The outpouring of support is incredible, and it just continues to carry us. I'll just cite a few stories. On Christmas, the number of photos that we had sent to us of Christmas dinner tables with empty plates with the name of Hersh or another hostage reserved at that table was heartwarming. The pictures that we get, like the group of elderly women in a church in a small town in Maine, all holding their hands up. And when I scrolled in, I saw that they had written Hersh on their hand as they pray. To the Jews here in Israel, I am not an ultra-Orthodox Haredi Jew, but I have gone several times to that community to meet with well-known rabbis. And I had an experience 2 weeks ago where I walked in the middle of a class being given by a well-known great rabbi in Bnei Brak, a room full of Haredi, ultra-Orthodox men. And somebody went over to the rabbi and said, the father of a hostage just walked in. And he closed his book, he pounded on the table, and he said in Hebrew, friends, we have here the father of a hostage. This is a matter of saving a life. We must stop the class now and recite Psalms together. And he got up and he led a tearful recitation of Psalms for the room. And just the number of soldiers on the street who come over to us and say, we just got home from 70 days, and what's driving us is trying to bring home Hersh and the other hostages. Just the support from everywhere is amazing. Now we need results.
And as you and Rachel and so many of the advocates have asked us all, there's been a call for collective action, for advocacy around the world to demand the release of all the hostages. What can we do to join you, to join your voices and your demands for the immediate release of those still held captive in Gaza?
So there are really 3 things we ask of people right now. The first is, it's so important. You talked about this at the beginning, that people talk about numbers. It was 240 something at the beginning and 134 now. Those are numbers. Every one of those numbers is a person with a personality and a story and loved ones. And it's so important that we humanize this situation and tell those stories. So my first ask of people is, help tell the story. raise the awareness. Don't let these hostages fall off of the news cycle or the congressional cycle. Tell their story. We tell ours very actively at Bring Hersh Home on all social channels. You can follow it, repost it, share it. We're part of the broader Bring Them Home Now story, where all of the hostages' stories are told. Please just keep telling the stories. Don't let this fall off the news cycle. The second thing is, early on, I was sitting in Washington with a member of the Biden administration, and I asked him what he would do if it were his own child held captive. And he said, hold us accountable. Call us every single day. Write to us. Text us. Keep on us. Make sure that we are doing everything we can until we bring them all home. And so we took that and we went back to the hostage forum and put up a website called 1 Minute Day, where we make it super easy. Now we've got over 200,000 people a day contacting the White House. And the same person who told us to do that over 100 days ago tells us it's working. You're keeping on us, and you should. So call your officials, call the White House. And the third one that we've added in the last few weeks is, in the same way that we are putting some pressure on the administration in the US, the Israeli cabinet, Israeli elected officials need that same pressure. They need to know, and in some ways I think it's more important that they hear from people outside of Israel than in Israel. They need to know that the Jewish people and the world are not okay with 134 hostages still being held. And we definitely will not be okay that the remaining living hostages don't stay that way and get brought home alive. To bring these hostages home in body bags, in coffins, cannot be any picture of any victory, and we cannot allow that to happen.
Well, thank you so much, Jon. Please know that everyone here is sending you strength and praying for Hersh's and the remaining hostages' immediate release. And we are so grateful to you and Rachel and your entire family for your leadership.
Thank you so much. Keep up the fight. Let's bring them all home.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
To introduce our next guest, I would like to welcome JDCA's Communication Manager, Jacob Spiegel. Jacob.
Thank you, Haley. And Jon, thank you so much for sharing such a powerful and personal story. My name is Jacob Spiegel, and while some of you may know me as JDCA's Communications Manager, I am also cousins with our next guest, Maya Roman, and with Yarden Roman, Maya's cousin, who was kidnapped by Hamas on October 7th, and thankfully freed on November 29th. To be more specific, I am Maya and Yarden's sixth cousin. Now, I don't know about any of you on this call, but I do not normally keep in close contact with everyone that I share a great-great-great-great-grandfather with. However, the reason that Maya and I know that we are related is because our family, remarkably, has a family tree that dates back to the 1600s. Originally written in Hebrew before being translated into German and then later into English, this family tree was actually presented to the German government by Maya and her family, who are dual German-Israeli citizens, to provide pressure to negotiate a deal to release the hostages. A reminder that the October 7th attack was not just an attack on Israel, but on Jews and non-Jews from around the world. In many ways, this tree holds within its branches not just the history of my family, but the modern history of the Jewish people. You can see our tragedies through names written in black text, representing those who perished in the Holocaust. And you can also see our joy in the birth of children and grandchildren and finding a new home in Israel or the United States. And now it holds a stark reminder of the October 7 attack by Hamas and the pain we all felt on that day and every day since. I am so grateful that we did not need to add another name in black text, another name of a family member taken from us simply for being Jewish. And I know that sadly, not every family was so lucky. This tree also shows that we as Jews are all connected. From across the world, when something happens to one of us, it impacts all of us, and it finds its way into the heart of every Jewish community, from Israel to Germany to the United States and to our own JDCA community. And while this may make every tragedy all the more painful, it also means that we can be here for one another, to listen to each other, to learn from each other, and to support each other however we can. So Maya, thank you so much for making the time to join us today, for being willing to share your story with us all, and for all the advocacy work you have done to help free Yarden and to work towards freeing Carmel Gat, Yarden's sister-in-law who remains in captivity. I will now turn it back over to Haley to begin the conversation with my cousin, Maya Roman. Haley, over to you. And Maya, welcome.
Thank you so much, Jacob. That was quite the remarkable story of our connections as Jewish people around the world. And Maya, thanks for joining us. Jacob brought us together. I believe it was about a month ago when you were just leaving DC, going back to Israel. So I had the chance of hearing your story, but I'd like everyone to hear it. So could you please tell us your story, including your experience on October 7th and over the past 4.5 months since, as you've become a leader in the movement to bring home the hostages?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for having me. And it is very special being here because of the connection and the family connection. I'm a little bit sick, so I'm a little bit slower than usual. I hope you'll forgive me. So yeah, October 7th, we woke up like everyone in Israel to the missile alarms, to the rocket attacks. I work in independent news. So quite quickly, I had started getting reports from people who work for me saying something feels different. We're hearing disturbing things. This isn't just another missile attack. My cousin Yarden lived for the past 4 years in Kibbutz Be'eri, which is quite close to the border. But on September 1st, actually, she and her husband and their 3-year-old Geffen had decided to leave the kibbutz. Not so much because they were scared for their life, but because Yarden had figured out that it's not good for her mental well-being and for raising her child, being around all the alarms and the constant anxiety involved with them. So they had just left, and they went on a family trip with Yarden's siblings, the rest of my cousins, to South Africa for 3 weeks. So I was quite certain that she's not in any particular danger. The family had just gotten back on October 6th. But after a couple of hours, I understood from the rest of the family that she and her husband and their daughter went back to visit her husband's family, who was still in Be'eri. We had Yarden is a very private person, and she doesn't like tech so much. So we had a rule that not everyone is going to ask her what's happening all the time, so she doesn't freak out. And every 30 minutes, she would talk to her brother, her big brother Gili, and he'll ask her if everything's okay, and she'll say okay. And that kept us calm for the morning. But at 10:30, she stopped responding to Gili's texts. At the same time, we started understanding that something quite wrong is happening, particularly in Be'eri. For the rest of the day, we didn't know a lot. So my day was mostly spent going crazy on social media, trying to find any kind of news. The following morning, we got a call from Alon, Yarden's husband, and he filled in what happened. It turns out that at around 10:30 a.m., terrorists entered his parents' home. At the house were he and Yarden and Geffen, as well as his mother and father and his older sister, Carmel. The terrorists separated the family members. Eshel, Alon's father, was able to hide in the bathroom, and through the bathroom window, he saw his family being taken away one by one. First, his wife, Kineret, was taken out, then separately, his daughter, Carmel, and then lastly, Alon, Yarden, and Geffen. We later learned that Kineret was murdered outside her home. We learned this through a video released by Hamas. So her son saw her death on Instagram. And we knew nothing about what had happened to Carmel until the hostage release deal. And Alon, Yarden, and Geffen were taken in a car towards the Gaza border. Right before the border, the car with the terrorists slowed down. And the terrorists got out. They had seen an Israeli tank. They wanted to take cover. So they got out of the car. Yarden and Alon seized the opportunity and decided to make a run for it. Yarden was holding Geffen in her arms as they both jumped out of the car, started running. And quite quickly, Yarden realized that she's not going to be able to run as fast. And so she decided to give Geffen over to Alon so he can run and hide with her as she stayed back. And this is what he did. He ran and found a hiding spot. He hid in a ditch with Geffen for almost 12 hours, hearing the trucks searching for them, going back and forth. When it got dark, he went out and started walking back towards the kibbutz. The kibbutz was still under fire, so it's important to understand that Be'eri was still filled with terrorists and not released until 3 days later. But luckily, he figured this out and went around and reached the IDF forces and was able to call us and tell us that he is okay and Geffen is okay, but he doesn't know what happened to Yarden. So that was the beginning of this weird journey for us. Yeah.
Thank you. So since October 7th, your family has had immense grief with the murder of Kinneret, moments of joy and relief, I'm sure, as Yarden was returned home in November, and now uncertainty as you await the release of Carmel. What should we know specifically about your family's experience with these three different experiences and now continuing to advocate for Carmel's release?
You know, I was just talking about it to a friend today. Yarden was released after 54 days during the first humanitarian deal. And I really think it's the most joyful moment of my life and the rest of my family's lives. And we think that all the other families deserve to experience that happiness. We know that not all of them are going to, because we know that many of the hostages are no longer with us. But you know, one of the reasons we keep advocating, in addition to the fact that Carmel is also our family member and that Yarden has asked us to, is that we think people should remember what we're fighting for. And the joy of seeing Yarden reunited with her daughter is really the most beautiful thing I think we can aspire to bring about to this world. So I think that's something that we should all take away. We're a very optimistic family, not because we think good things necessarily happen. You know, Yarden and her siblings lost their mother to pancreatic cancer just a year ago. So we've had some rough things happen to our family in the past few years. But we're optimistic as kind of a stated goal, a stated way of thinking, in the sense that we think it's better. We think it's the only way to make some things better if we stay optimistic. And I think that what has saved us as a family was being able to do and act. And, you know, there were times where we had no idea if all of our advocacy work was helping, but we knew that at least it was helping us cope, and that's also something. So, you know, we've been, since October 7th, or on October 8th, I was called up by my uncle and asked to come join the family war room that was being established. I was in charge of media. We had focused on Germany, because as Jacob mentioned, we're dual citizenship with Germany. But really, we started working on so many different fronts, and it's very hard and it's very tiring. So that's the second thing I would say is I've only had to do it as someone whose close family member is gone for 54 days. We still miss Carmel, but Carmel is Yarden's sister-in-law, so I'm not that close to her personally, and there's a huge difference in my state of mind of the way I act right now. And I just thinking about being in that same space for so long, it's heartbreaking. And so I think we all have to, on the one hand, think about all the happiness that we can bring when we bring these people home, and at the same time, think about what all these families are still going through. And, part of what's so hard is that we know we are the best people to advocate for our loved ones. We are the only ones that only care about this and not about any other political issue. This is all we care about, bringing everyone home. But it's also really hard because we know the best way, as Jon said, to create any kind of movement is to tell the personal story and to have people connect to that story. But it means that the families have to really kill themselves by reconnecting to this traumatic event and traumatic story. And it's very, very hard. So I really thank everyone here for, being willing to help us take this load, because it's just very heavy, I think.
Of course. And, we've all been watching over the recent past few months. Of course, in November, there was the release over 6 days, including Yarden, of 112 hostages, as well as 2 hostages who were recently heroically released in a rescue mission. Of course, those that are still in captivity have family like yourself still advocating for their release, as well as those like Yarden who have family who are held in Gaza. How is Yarden doing in her healing? And what specific concerns do you have about the women who remain in captivity in Gaza?
Yarden is doing quite well considering all that's happened. She was quite lucky in some ways. We know that people are being held in very, very different conditions. So in that sense, she was lucky in the sense that she didn't experience any physical harm. But of course, it's very hard and it's a long road. She has a lot of difficulty, some of it related to the fact that there are still hostages over there. And I've heard this from many of the families who have hostages who have come back. They feel responsible. They feel like they know what it's like. And they have some sort of survivor's guilt in a way, feeling like, why am I here while there are still so many people over there? And so one of the things that are making it hard for her to move on is the fact that not everyone is back. And that's also something we need to remember. It's true that there are no longer 240 hostages, but the fact that there are still so many hostages over there impacts everyone who has been there and all of their families. As you said, many of the families have some family members who have come back and some family members who have not. And that means that the families themselves still aren't able to move on. So of course, Alon, Yarden's husband, his sister is still over there, and the entire family, this is still what we're doing. And it's quite difficult for Yarden because she feels like nothing is normal. And she doesn't know when anything will be normal again. One of the things that are hard for her is she's a very private person. So the fact that everyone knows her in Israel now, people are being extremely nice and they want to come up to her and tell her how happy they are that she's back. But for her, it's very hard. It's a reminder of how not normal everything is. And she has told us, even though she was lucky in the sense that she didn't experience any direct harm, but the constant fear stays with you. So for 54 days, she was terrified. She knew that she had no way to defend herself. If any of her guards, her 3 male guards, wanted to do anything to her. She told us that, you know, as when they arrived, she was given a hijab to wear. And at a certain point, her captors told her she can loosen it up a little bit because now she's been with them, with the family for so long, she doesn't have to wear it as tightly anymore. And she was like, no, I'm gonna keep wearing it, because she felt like that was her protection, even though, of course, rationally, we know that it doesn't necessarily make any difference, but that was her kind of talisman. And we are extremely worried about what Carmel is experiencing in captivity right now. Just today, there was a report released by the Center for Rape Victims in Israel, detailing all of the various kinds of sexual assault experienced in October 7th by women in captivity. It's a horrendous report, but it shows what we're dealing with and our fears. You know, we have a lot of concerns regarding how to speak about these issues. There are things the family knows that they don't necessarily want out there because we don't want it to get back to the captors of our prisoners and lead to any further harm. So, you know, people have to realize that the families are in this terrible place where we can't say everything that we want to say. I can say that we know from children who were held with Carmel that they were held in quite difficult conditions, that they experienced physical harm. They told us that Carmel was there helping them. She taught them yoga and meditation. That's why we have weekly yoga events to kind of connect to her in our own way. But it means that we're extremely worried for what she's going through. And, you know, we don't want, one of the issues is there are only 13 women left. We don't want everyone in Israel to think when they come back, we don't want everyone to assume what they have been through. We know that that's very problematic and traumatic for people who have been through any kind of sexual assault, which is why I feel we all have to be very careful in the way we speak about these things. At the same time, we know that there are terrible things happening over there, and that's just another reason why we have to bring them all back very quickly.
Thank you. And our last question for you, Maya, is that you have spent quite a bit of time in the United States advocating on behalf of the hostages. Based on your time here and in Washington, what do you think is the most important form of advocacy that we can do, including with elected officials, advocating for the hostages' release?
So first off, what Jon said was very comprehensive, and I agree with every single point he made about the constant pressure. The US has been so crucial for us in advancing the previous deal, in advancing hopefully another deal. We need the support. We need the support to continue. I think one of the things, you know, in addition to that, if some people here have specific connections to specific elected officials, you can think about the different messages related to different parts of Congress. For example, as Jon mentioned, we also need pressure on our government. I think this kind of pressure, actually, the best way to bring it about is through the Republican side of Congress, through people more connected to our current government, whose opinions matter more to them. At the same time, you know, I, as someone who is part of the liberal world here in Israel, and I work in nonprofits here in Israel, identify very much with some of the democratic values and what Democrats have been saying regarding the humanitarian situation in Gaza. But if you're close to people who speak about those issues, it's important to remind them that any kind of end to the war has to come with releasing the hostages. We cannot afford to call for a ceasefire without, at the very same time, saying release the hostages, because if there will be a ceasefire without a deal for releasing the hostages, we will not see them back. And even though that's hard to understand and it hurts because the humanitarian aspect of it is really terrible, we have to realize that the humanitarian aspect includes the hostages, and that's something that, if you're speaking to people on that side of the aisle, is very, very important to make sure they understand. So I think those are the points I can add to what Jon has expertly said.
Thank you so much, Maya, for speaking with us. We are relieved that Yarden is back home with you and your family, and send her and your entire family prayers for Carmel's return and healing. And I hope you feel better, since you mentioned you're sick.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would now like to welcome our final speaker, Shany Granot Lubaton. Since October 7th, Shany has served as the coordinator of the Hostage and Missing Families Forum in New York, a group she co-founded with her husband, Omer, following October 7th. In her capacity as coordinator of the forum, she has helped to organize demonstrations advocating for the hostages' release, including protests in front of the UN and weekly marches through Central Park. Prior to October 7th, Shany had been organizing activists in New York against judicial overhaul in Israel. And prior to that, Shany was the chief of staff of the former head of the opposition, MK Shely Yakimovich, as well as deputy director of the Darkenu movement, Israel's largest nonpartisan civil society movement, committed to advocating for democracy, equality, and social justice. So thank you for joining us, Shany. So thanks. As mentioned, immediately following October 7th, you and Omer founded the Hostage and Missing Family Forum to connect and offer to support to and advocate for families with and advocate for the hostages and their immediate release. What inspired you to organize the forum, and what has the forums achieved over the past 4.5 months?
Well, actually, for us, it was October 6th, because it was Friday night. And being Israelis here in New York, we go to sleep very late so we can hear the news in Israel before we go to sleep. So it was like 11:30 p.m. And as mentioned, we were leading the pro-democracy movement from here, from New York. We were rallying for Israel's democracy for the past, it was about 10 months when it happened. And then it was very immediate for us, just like the pro-democracy movements and organizations back in Israel. So the switch was very, very immediate. Like at, I think, 11:30, the alarm started. By 1 a.m., we understood pretty much that there are like tons of people that has to be evacuated, that the kibbutzim are going under this horrific massacre. And we started working on a platform to fundraise for the people that are going to be evacuated. Our friends got messages they have to, like our male friends back home got messages that they have to go to the border to fight. And like they didn't have enough equipment. And so we started fundraising for life-saving gear for soldiers as well. And when I think by the morning, or pretty much 24 hours after it all started, we've realized that there are many hostages. So the first action we did before even starting this forum was projecting the photos of some of the hostages we already knew that were taken on the UN building, kind of to mark the world that this is a humanitarian crisis that everybody needs to step up for, and it's not just an inner Israeli or Jewish kind of crisis. And I think this is a message that we're trying to convey throughout these 4.5 months, because the hostages are coming from over 20 different nationalities, from 5 different religions, right? It's very close to us. They've been taken away from Israel because they were in Israel, but this is a bigger deal. So we're trying to convey this message from the very beginning. And actually, my husband's cousins, we got a message. They're from Kibbutz Kfar Aza, and we got a message that they were murdered, but only 2 bodies were found, and that the house was burned down. And then 6 days after, meanwhile, we were starting to create this Hostages Families Forum on the base ground of the pro-democracy movement that we had. We used the same resources and the WhatsApp groups and the email listservs and so on. And then 6 days after October 7th, we got a message that my husband's cousin was actually not murdered, but taken hostage together with her 3 young children. So this also became very personal. The Hostages Families Forum was already something we started here when we got that message. So I don't know to say exactly what inspired us to do it, but I feel it was very immediate. Like there was no moment to spare, and no one thought to do something else. It was just like, okay, this is what we have to do right now to help Israel in every way, which is like to help with the evacuated people from the kibbutzim, to help saving lives in any way we can, and to fight for the lives of the ones that were taken away from us. And then if I think about, I mean, the achievements that we had, well, it's very hard because I keep holding, as Jon said, the failure, the horrific feeling that we all go through, that we all take with us every night when we go to sleep and every morning when we wake up, is that there are still 134 hostages in Gaza. Most of them are still alive, and that every day that passes that they're not being released is a day where we fail them. But if I want to kind of mark the things that I think we have succeeded to do, is create this awareness, and I think in time the global media is losing their interest in this story, and then we're trying to do different things to push the personal stories to create more interest in the hostages crisis. If we're doing different creative things throughout the city and the US, we're trying to create a big community as large as we can, supporting the families. We have many hostages families members that are coming in delegations to New York City. We try to push them to get the highest kind of ranked interviews and media coverage as possible. And this is, I think, one very, very important front that we're dealing with. And then the diplomatic one, we're having many meetings with the Red Cross and with the UN Secretary General and with different ambassadors. I mean, as I said, they're coming from different nationalities, and the UN headquarters are here. So the Chinese ambassador, I mean, he's really important for Noah Argamani's family. And I mean, we have different opportunities here in New York City, which we don't have in Israel and we don't have in other places around the world. So we're trying kind of to do everything we can do from here. And also just, I know it sounds sometimes like not effective enough, but we know from the family members that are coming that it really sends them strength. Just the simple knowing that they're not alone, that we're standing with them in solidarity, that we're holding their loved ones' signs every Friday, every Sunday, every time we can, and holding this pain with them, not letting them be alone in this fight. So these are kind of the 3 fronts: the solidarity one, the diplomatic one, and the media one.
Thank you. Just to delve a bit into the diplomatic front, despite international rules of law requiring the Red Cross to meet with and provide care to hostages, Hamas has denied officials access to hostages held in Gaza, and the families do not know the well-being and health of their loved ones. We know Israel has attempted to get medicine to the hostages, but there's been no confirmation that it's been received. And there are claims it was diverted in Gaza. And now there's also competing claims from Qatari officials that the aid was reaching the hostages, but there's just continued uncertainty. How has the forum played a role in advocating for medicine getting to the hostages? Do you have any confirmation that it's been received? And how has the Red Cross failed in Gaza?
Well, in many ways, I think the answer is within the question, it has failed. I think it's really crazy to me how, I mean, speaking as a liberal, democratic, human rights fighter, have always been one. It's really crazy to me how people keep kind of talking about the laws and human rights laws, and just keep forgetting this fact that you just mentioned, that like the Red Cross hasn't reached the hostages and that they're not getting their medicines. So, I mean, we know that the IDF just found a few days ago boxes that Israel sent into Gaza. They found it in the hospital. The boxes were closed. The medicines were there with the names of the hostages on them. So we definitely know most of the medicines did not arrive where it should have go to. Qatar are saying, I just got a push message that they're saying that they have proof that some of the medicines have arrived, but we have very, very strong bond here with the Red Cross management, and we're meeting them constantly. They meet the family members. They say that they are very vocal about it. They're bringing the stories that they meet here into Geneva, where the main headquarters are staying, and they're doing everything they can. They keep saying that a lot of things are happening, not in a way they can speak of, but they're doing a lot of efforts. But still, as they say as well in their own words, they say, we have failed. We're failing the families, we're failing the hostages, and we're failing our aim. They're saying this. So I think Hamas is just not letting the Red Cross get anywhere near the hostages, and not letting them pass on the medicines or any other help. Our family members that got back were in the tunnels before they came to Israel for a few days with young women that they know that are being sexually assaulted daily. Chen Almog Goldstein and Agam Goldstein Almog, these are our family members that got back, and they're saying horrific, horrible stories from the tunnels, what they heard from the girls that are still there, and the fact that the Red Cross can send them anything, even to stop pregnancy in case that this has happened, because some of them has been raped. So this is really, for me, unbearable. And yeah, it's a big failure of the Red Cross and of the global community in general, because humanitarian crisis is something that everybody has to work for, and not just the Red Cross or just the Israelis. It's a bigger, or the Jewish community, it's a bigger matter, and I feel like global leaders are failing us.
It is unbearable and extremely painful to know that these atrocities are happening and not be able to stop it. Focusing on diplomacy, over the past 4.5 months, negotiators have worked to secure the release of hostages and end fighting. And we did see some success in November with 6 days of release of 112 hostages. What is the state of negotiations now, and what are the prospects for freeing the remaining hostages? Which countries do you think can actually make this happen, and how can we go about getting them released?
Well, the current situation is that there is a negotiation in Cairo, but unfortunately, the Israeli cabinet have decided not to send the right people, like the people who can make decisions into this into the room in Cairo, because they say that the deal on the table is irrelevant and nothing they're going to sign on. And as Jon and Maya said, we're in a very, very hard position, specifically from here also, because I think it's very obvious for all of us that anti-Semitism is rising, and anti-Israel is rising, and we're trying to have this kind of, to convey a message of, yes, we need to push the Israeli government, but it's not coming from an anti-Semitic point of view. It's because we want the hostages back home. So we can't kind of protest from here because we have all these fronts at the same time. And for me, as an Israeli that have never seen anti-Semitism and kind of thought it's this old thing, it's a real front for us here, and it makes the pushing the Israeli cabinet from here harder for us. But yeah, so at this time there is still negotiation. It's not anywhere close to a deal today as we speak right now. It was closer to a deal a few days ago. Now it's getting far and back. I think that Qatar is a very, very strong key in this negotiation. It's something we all understand, and pushing Qatar to make this deal, to push Hamas, is a very, very important tool we have here from the global community, for the U.S. administration, for the Biden administration, for the UN Secretary General, who is very, very, Antonio Guterres, who is very, very close with the Qatari Prime Minister. And we believe that a global pressure, this won't be only an Israeli Jewish, but a kind of if we'll have protests all around the world, if we'll push the Qatar embassies around the world, if we push each country, each community will push their own government very, very firmly, then this will happen. Because at the end of the day, both Israel and Hamas needs other countries to help this crisis to come to an end. And I strongly believe that there is no other way to save the hostages. Of course, I admire the IDF soldiers who were so brave and saved 2 hostages, but we know that there is no other way. So a deal has to come. We want to see all of them coming in the next deal, because we see that when we're stopping a deal, making another one takes a long time, and it becomes harder and harder. So we will push for a deal for all in this next deal. And for us, I think it's also very important to say that it's a Jewish organization. So even though I'm secular, I know that there is no greater mitzvah than bringing back hostages. It's something the Rambam said, and it's written in many resources of the Jewish people. And there's nothing more Jewish, there's nothing more moral than releasing them. So yeah, we hope that both the Israeli government and the cabinet and global leaders will push for it. And of course, we're working against or with or in front of a terror organization, and it's really, really hard because they're not putting human lives at the top priority.
Thank you, Shany. And for those of us in New York, myself not included, but there are some on this call in New York, how can they join you each week? Where will you be and when?
So the Hostages Families Forum in New York we have 2 regular rallies every Friday at 9 a.m. We stand outside the U.S. Secretary General's residence, Antonio Guterres' house, every Friday 9 a.m. It's at 3 Sutton Place in Manhattan, and we stand there Friday 9 a.m. And every Sunday at 11 a.m. on Central Park West and 90th Street, we march and run. Even if you're not runners, you can join us. Most of the people are marching for their lives. We're walking with the hostages photos. We have hostages family members that are coming every week from Israel, and they really need this hug and this support and this solidarity. It brings them light and strength, as they say themselves. So these are two opportunities to join us. And we have many events throughout the city, and when we have delegations, and many opportunities to come and meet the families and to hear the stories and then to share them. And I think also, if I can add, it's social media is actually very important, and it's a very hard front we're all confronting with, and sharing the stories and telling what you're hearing and keeping these people on other people's minds is really, really important.
Wonderful. Well, it does sound like a mitzvah. And for those of us in New York, we will try to join you. Or those of us visiting New York, we will try to join you. So thank you so much, Shany. Thanks to Jon and Rachel and Maya for joining us, and to all of you for being with us today. I would now like to welcome JDCA's Chief Program Officer, Bobby Saferstein, to conclude today's program. Bobby, over to you.
Thank you, Haley, and thank you to all of our speakers and to each of you for joining us, our 12th community conversation since October 7th. Over the past 138 days, I, like so many of you, have struggled with the complete range of emotions tied to a nightmare that's both over 5,000 miles away and also right here at home, in my living room, at my coffee shop, everywhere I go. Watching and waiting from afar is excruciating, and whatever I try to do and help, it just never feels like it's enough. But coming together like we have done today to listen to these stories and keeping the names of every hostage taken at the forefront of the conversation is one of the most important things we can be doing, because bearing witness and sharing the stories of those who cannot share for themselves is how we bring them home. Today's conversation is not easy, but being in community is how we get through this. It's one of the most Jewish things we can do. And we're grateful that you have chosen to do so with us at the Jewish Democratic Council of America. To learn more about programs like these and how you can get involved in our work, please visit jewishdems.org. While there, we encourage you to join us in taking action by supporting a number of calls to action, of whose links will be posted in the chat. Also, to learn more how to get involved in the Hostage and Missing Families Forum, 1 minute a day, and efforts to bring Hersh home, please also visit those links in the chat. Next Wednesday, February 28th at 12 p.m., please join us back here for our next community conversation, focused on responding to anti-Semitism on campus in the wake of October 7th. We'll be joined by Dr. Nicholas Lehman, journalist, Dean Emeritus of Columbia University School of Journalism, and a member of the Columbia University Task Force on Anti-Semitism, Julia Jassy, CEO of Jewish on Campus, and the program will be moderated by Stacy Burdett, past Vice President of Government Relations, Advocacy, and Community Engagement at the ADL. And this is being done in partnership with Hillel International. To sign up, please click on the link in the chat. As we close out today's program, let us continue to pray for good news. And as Hersh Goldberg-Polin says, do what we can to act human in these trying times. Thank you again for joining us, and see you next week.